I'm Mark Kerrigan, and this is Forgotten Urban Histories, a brand new podcast that uncovers the extraordinary stories buried amongst and beneath our cities. Every street, every wall, every underground passage has a memory carved into it. Tales of ambition, faith, invention, and obsession that time tried to erase. From hidden catacombs to abandoned railways, secret societies to visionary builders, we'll travel beneath the modern world to rediscover the strange and the overlooked, the layers of history that have largely been forgotten. Our first journey takes us beneath the city of Liverpool in the United Kingdom to a labyrinth no map ever showed. A vast network of underground tunnels dug by a single man for reasons no one has ever fully understood. They called him the Mole of Edge Hill, and his world beneath the streets remains one of Britain's most enduring mysteries. So grab your torch, take a deep breath, and let's head underground. Cities keep secrets. Every pavement and alley hides a story. But some cities, Liverpool amongst them, don't just keep their histories beneath the surface, they build entire worlds there. Beneath the red brick terraces of Edge Hill, about a mile east of Liverpool centre, lies one of the strangest man-made landscapes in Britain. A honeycomb of chambers, corridors and shafts cut into the sandstone ridge. Some passages are tall enough to march a regiment through. Others force a man to crawl, candle clenched beneath his teeth, knees scraping the rock. Walk the streets above and you'd never suspect it. A row of modest Victorian houses, a corner pub, the distant hum of trains at Edge Hill Station. Yet, just beneath the pavement lies an invisible city, miles of arched brickwork, stairways to nowhere, shafts plunging 40 feet into shadows. For generations, locals have known these depths only as the Williamson Tunnels, a name whispered with a kind of pride and bewilderment, as if the earth itself had kept a secret for 200 years. They were first dug in the early 19th century, a time when Liverpool was swelling into one of the most important ports in the world. Ships crowded its docks, masts bristled like forests against the sky. Tobacco, sugar, rum, cotton, spices. Wealth flowed in from every corner of the empire. But wealth rarely spreads evenly. For every grand merchant's townhouse, there were 10 families packed into damp cellars. The same sandstone that would one day cradle Williamson's tunnels was then quarried to build warehouses and chapels. Liverpool was booming and breaking all at once. At the turn of the 19th century, Liverpool was a paradox in brick. A population of barely 80,000 in 1760 had exploded past 120,000 by 1800, a metropolis of sailors, dockers, merchants and migrants. By day, the air smelled of salt, tar and molasses. By night, the narrow streets of the dock quarter flickered with tavern lamps and the shouts of sailors speaking a dozen languages. The newly built warehouses along the Mersey stood as monuments to commerce and to Britain's colonial reach. The slave trade, officially abolished in 1807, had made Liverpool rich, and its aftermath still shaped the city's conscience. Fortunes built on human misery left shadows that lingered in polite society, even as new industries rose to take their place. Religiously, the city was a mosaic. Anglicans, Methodists, Quakers, Catholics, and a growing number of nonconformists filled chapels across the hills. It was an age of moral fervour, social reform, and the occasional apocalypse preaching, the perfect climate for eccentric faiths and visionary schemes. This was the Liverpool Joseph Williamson stepped into, a city of extremes, faith and fortune, poverty and philanthropy, progress and paranoia. Back on the ridge of Edge Hill, the sandstone itself became part of that story. It was easy to cut, perfect for cellars, vaults and quarries, and, as it turned out, for something far stranger. Beginning around 1805, teams of labourers started carving into the ridge under Williamson's direction. Over the next 3 decades, they created a labyrinth no one could quite explain. Some tunnels stretched for hundreds of metres, others doubled back into themselves like a riddle with no answer. The craftsmanship varies. Some sections rough and hastily braced, others so exquisitely built they rival church crypts. Modern surveys suggest that the network sprawls across several hectares, layering 3 and 4 levels deep. Yet not a single official record lists their construction. No municipal permit, no engineering blueprint, not even a note in a contractor's ledger. Step into the tunnels beneath Edge Hill and it's like entering another century. The air changes the moment you leave daylight. It thickens, cools, and carries a smell of wet brick, old clay, and the faint tang of rust from the iron supports that still brace the ceiling. Your footsteps echo differently down here, sometimes hollow and sharp, sometimes muffled as if the walls themselves are swallowing the sound. The main passage opens into what is known as the banqueting hall, one of the grandest chambers. It's vast, almost cathedral-like, with a barrel-vaulted ceiling of hand-laid brick that soars above you in perfect symmetry. The walls are lined with alcoves, their curves smooth and deliberate. Some say Williamson used to host gatherings here, candlelight reflecting off damp brickwork while guests dined in the underground hall. A stone staircase, crumbling but still sturdy, spirals up to a high gallery where you can almost imagine musicians once stood. The floor, uneven now with silt and rubble, glitters faintly in places where mineral salts have crystallised over the years like frost. Further in, there's the wine bins chamber, a smaller vault lined with narrow recesses carved directly into the sandstone. Each one could have held bottles, perhaps from Williamson's own cellar. A few fragments of glass remain, their edges worn smooth by time. On one ledge lies an old clay pipe broken at the stem, its bowl still blackened from smoke. A few passages away, the tunnel tightens into the Paddington section, where everything feels more raw. The walls here are unfinished, the sandstone gouged and scored by pick marks. Wooden beams, grey with age and humidity, still prop up the roof in places. Discarded bricks lie in heaps as though the workers downed tools one afternoon and never came back. Among the rubble, explorers sometimes find shards of pottery, corroded nails, and small fragments of animal bone, relics of everyday life sealed underground when the chambers were filled in. In one of the deeper chambers, a spiral staircase descends into a black pit known as the double tunnel, where 2 levels cross over each other. The lower passage is flooded, ankle deep in still, cold water that mirrors the torchlight in ripples on the ceiling. Down there, you can see the soot stains left by the candles of 19th century workmen and initials scratched into the brick. J.W., T.H., 1824, marks of the men who toiled for reasons they never understood. Scattered through the system are smaller curiosities, rusted iron hooks hammered into the walls, their purpose long forgotten, a half-collapsed wheelbarrow petrified in place by mud, a solitary blue and white porcelain cup sitting on a ledge, too delicate and out of place to make sense. Some say Williamson himself used to inspect the work with a glass of wine in hand. Perhaps this is his. As you explore further, you'll notice how the tunnels change personality. Some feel almost domestic, shaped like basements with evidence of steps and door frames that once led to houses above. Others are pure fantasy. Arched chambers with no entrances or exits, walls built across corridors for no reason, staircases that end abruptly at ceilings of solid rock. It's as if the tunnels were less a construction project rather than a stream of consciousness. Williamson's imagination, mapped out in brick and stone. The deeper you go, the quieter it becomes. The only sounds are the steady drip of water, the distant tremor of trains above, and the soft hiss of your own breathing. In the farthest reaches, the section still half filled with rubble, the air grows heavy and the space narrows. Here, torchlight picks out shards of coloured pottery, rusted tools, and the occasional glint of something unidentifiable, half buried in the clay. Standing in that silence, surrounded by arches and passageways that lead nowhere, you realise how strange this place really is. Every surface carries the mark of hands long gone. Every wall holds a mystery. These aren't ruins in the usual sense. They're unfinished thoughts suspended underground. 2 centuries on, Williamson's tunnels feel less like architecture and more like a dream given solid form, a subterranean puzzle box where history, obsession and imagination still breathe quietly in the dark. Who builds a labyrinth in the middle of a thriving city and tells no one why? As the decades passed, the tunnels slipped from civic memory. A few rumours persisted, whispers of smugglers' routes, of secret quarries, of hidden churches, but no one could point to proof. All anyone knew for certain is that one man had paid for it all, Joseph Williamson, a tobacco merchant turned landowner, whose imagination seemed to be as vast as the tunnels themselves. To understand the tunnels, we have to understand their maker, a man who seemed to live between worlds, part merchant, part visionary, part enigma. Joseph Williamson was born in 1769 in the market town of Warrington, about 20 miles from Liverpool. His father, a glassmaker, died when Joseph was young, leaving his mother to raise him and his brother. Like many ambitious young men of the time, Joseph left home to seek work in the booming port city of Liverpool, a city bursting with energy, wealth and contradictions. By the late 1700s, Liverpool was one of Britain's busiest ports, the gateway to Atlantic trade routes. Ships brought tobacco, sugar, rum and goods from across the empire. The city was loud, industrious and rough-edged, a place where fortunes could be made and lost in a single shipment. Williamson found employment with Richard Tate, a successful tobacco merchant. He started as a clerk, but quickly showed a keen mind for business, disciplined, precise, and strangely secretive. Tate saw promise in him, and in time, Williamson married his employer's daughter, Elizabeth Tate, securing both affection and a firm foothold in Liverpool's mercantile elite. The marriage brought wealth and status. By his 40s, Williamson owned several properties, including land on the newly developed Edge Hill, a steep sandstone ridge overlooking the city and docks below. But what he built there was anything but ordinary. His houses were solid and handsome, large bay windows, fine brickworks and broad cellars. Yet beneath them, he ordered the construction of something stranger. Workers were instructed to dig deep into the rock, carving out chambers, arches and corridors. When questioned, Williamson gave few answers. He was known to deflect with humour or riddles, sometimes refusing to speak at all. To his neighbours, he became a curiosity, the eccentric gentleman with endless building projects. Those who met him describe a man of contrasts. He was generous but guarded, charitable but controlling. He donated to churches and employed the poor, yet often dismissed visitors abruptly if they asked too many questions. His dress was formal, his manner reserved, until something stirred his passion. Then he could speak with a fierce conviction about duty, faith, and the value of hard work. Servants said he was fond of walking at night, lantern in hand, inspecting his property and the ongoing excavations. He paid his workers well by local standards, and fed them too, but rarely explained the purpose of their labours. In a city where gossip travels fast, rumours grew. Some said he was building secret vaults to store contraband, others that he sought to create an underground refuge for the coming apocalypse. But the most common view was simpler, that Joseph Williamson was a man with too much money and too much imagination, driven by restlessness and curiosity rather than madness. Whatever the truth, by the time he was in his 50s, the tunnels had become his life's obsession. Every spare coin, every waking hour, every idea seemed to sink into the sandstone beneath Edge Hill. It is said that when a friend once asked him why he was digging so furiously, Williamson simply smiled and replied, "The devil makes work for idle hands." And with that, he walked away. The devil makes work for idle hands. That single line, casually thrown out by Joseph Williamson, has become the most famous explanation for the tunnels underneath Liverpool. It's neat, it's moral, it sounds almost charitable. But like everything about Williamson, it's only one possible truth. And there are four main theories people are still arguing about today. That the Williamson tunnels were an act of charity, an act of fear, an act of faith, or an act of obsession. Let's have a look at each one of them. The philanthropy theory. When the Napoleonic Wars ended in 1815, Britain had a problem. thousands of men who had been soldiers, sailors, and labourers in wartime industries suddenly found themselves unemployed. Liverpool, a port city that pulsed with war contracts and shipping, felt that crash hard. And the story goes like this. Williamson, already wealthy from property and tobacco, looked around Edge Hill and saw men with no work and no food. So he hired them. He put men to work digging tunnels, carving chambers, laying brick vaults, even when those tunnels led to nowhere. And when a job finished, instead of dismissing them, he'd order another chamber dug or another wall put up and then torn down just to keep them paid. There are accounts of him employing men no one else would take, former soldiers with injuries, men with criminal records, men who'd simply fallen through the cracks of a city that didn't care. To supporters of this view, Williamson wasn't mad. He was compassionate. He created pointless work on purpose so that desperate people could keep their dignity and keep their families fed. That version of Joseph Williamson feels almost heroic. It turns the tunnels into an act of quiet social care, and it fits his famous line about idle hands. But there's a problem. If this was purely benevolence, just a jobs program, why the secrecy? Why the depth? Why the architectural care in places no one was ever supposed to see the workmanship? Why build beauty in the dark? Another theory says that Williamson's motives were not generous, but anxious. In the early 1800s, British religious culture, especially outside the established church, could be intensely, deeply moral and occasionally apocalyptic. Edge Hill and the surrounding districts were home to dissenters, reformers, and fringe religious voices. Some preached that judgment was coming, fire from above, destruction, the end of days. According to this view, William believed some kind of catastrophe, whether divine punishment, social collapse, or foreign invasion, was not just possible, but imminent. So he built down. Some of the tunnels sit astonishingly deep below the surface. Some chambers are sealed off, self-contained. Some are large enough to shelter groups of people for long periods of time. There are archways that feel less like storage chambers and more like refuge bays. To believers in this theory, the tunnels are not random at all. They're a bunker system, a sanctuary, a place to wait out the end of the world. There's even a suggestion, not proven but often repeated, that Williamson talked about preparing for what was to come. Preparing who? And for what event? He never wrote it down. But oral memory in Liverpool can be stubborn. Stories cling. Now, could that be legend layered on later? Well, yes. But is it completely out of character for a wealthy, devout 19th century man to build his own private ark in stone? Not at all. The next theory sits close to the apocalypse idea, but it's not about fear, it's about faith. Several accounts describe Williamson as intensely religious, but also peculiar in his religion. Not simply pious in the public, respectable Church of England way, but more personal, private, almost secretive. Some researchers have suggested that the tunnels might have had a spiritual function, not a doomsday bunker, but a place for moral testing. Think about the experience. You're sent underground with a lantern. You work in darkness and heat. You carve stone no one else will see. You're exhausted, anonymous, replaceable, and yet still expected to do careful work. To a certain kind of 19th century moralist, that is virtue. Obedience, discipline, humility. Labour as purification. In other words, the tunnels could have been a moral machine. According to this theory, Williamson didn't just pay men so they wouldn't starve, he believed he was improving them, shaping them, saving them. This is a much less cosy kind of charity. It turns him from a benevolent employer into something closer to an engineer of souls. And then there is the simplest explanation. Maybe he was simply obsessed. People who meet Joseph Williamson late in his life describe him as strong-willed, proud, stubborn, and not overly concerned with what other people thought of him. He was known to dismiss polite society and ignore direct questions. He could be charming, but also cutting. He did not enjoy being told no. One story says that if a workman challenged an instruction, "Sir, why build a wall here? It blocks the passage we just made," Williamson would snap back, "Build it because I said build it." Another says that after men finished carefully bricking up an arch, Williamson would sometimes order the same men to knock it down and then rebuild it again, not to improve it, just to repeat it. On the surface, that sounds unhinged and wasteful, but listen to the pattern. Control, experiment, perfectionism. Ownership of space no one else could enter. The tunnels in this reading were a private kingdom. He was making a world that belonged only to him. And if you've already made your money, if you already have the house, the land, the reputation, what else is there to conquer? Some historians argue that this is the most likely answer. That the tunnels aren't one grand design, they're an accumulation of impulses, pride, curiosity, stubborn, boredom, and control. The inner life of a man written in sandstone. So, which of these theories is true? And here's the honest answer. No one knows. And that's what makes the Williamson's tunnels so irresistible. When you walk down them today, past brick archways and hand-cut steps, through chambers that haven't seen daylight since the 1930s, you're not just walking through old engineering, you're walking through a question. Were these tunnels built to save men or to use them? Were they an act of charity or preparation or ego? Were they a refuge for the desperate or a monument to one man's will? In a way, the answer might be yes to all of it. Joseph Williamson lived in a world of poverty and instability. He was religious, status-conscious, and not entirely predictable. He had money to spend and an almost theatrical sense of secrecy. He liked to be in control. He liked to be the only one who knew the full story. So maybe the tunnels are exactly him. Layered, enclosed, half generous, half terrifying. A city beneath a city, and a man beneath a man. For more than a century after Joseph Williamson's death, his tunnels slipped out of memory. The world above moved on. Liverpool grew, railways cut through Edge Hill, Victorian houses went up, then went down, docks boomed, the war came and went, the Beatles played in the Cavern Club just a few miles away, and while beneath it all, the sandstone chambers lay silent, sealed beneath brick and earth. By the mid-20th century, most people thought the stories were just that, stories, an eccentric's legend exaggerated by time. Then in the early 1990s, a group of local history enthusiasts and residents began to dig, literally. They called themselves the Friends of the Williamson Tunnel. They weren't archaeologists at first, just people who'd heard rumours that strange voids existed under Mason Street and Smithdown Lane. Armed with shovels, torches, and a lot of persistence, they began clearing one old cellar at a time. What they found astonished them. Beneath the bricked-up doorways and buried staircases lay vast chambers, perfectly preserved. Vaulted ceilings, brick arches, buttressed walls, all hidden in complete darkness since the 19th century. Some still held fragments of pottery, bottles, and the soot mark of candle smoke. In one chamber, they uncovered a spiral staircase leading to an open void, a 30-foot drop to another level below. In another, they found the enormous arched hall, the brickwork still sharp and clean as the day it was laid. And everywhere they found evidence of Williamson's strange obsession with symmetry. Walls built for no reason except to please the eye of a man no longer alive to see them. The volunteers soon realised they had a massive job ahead. Decades of demolition rubble filled every passage. There were no professional grants at first, no government funding. Just buckets, barrows and goodwill. Week after week they cleared by hand. Tons of earth, old bricks, rusting iron. Occasionally they'd hit a section of intact tunnels and have to crawl through, shoulders scraping the sandstone, unsure of what lay beyond. Each discovery led to more questions. Some passages curved back on themselves. Others ended in sheer rock or sudden voids. Every chamber seemed to defy logic. Slowly, through the 1990s and early 2000s, the Williamson Tunnel Heritage Centre took shape. A proper archaeological team joined. Local councils began to take interest. The tunnels were mapped, photographed and stabilised. Today, visitors can descend into sections of this underground world, guided by electric light where once only candles burned. It is a strange experience walking through them. You pass through a modern entrance and within seconds the city disappears. The air grows cooler. The walls glow gold in torchlight. And as you step into the deeper chambers, time folds back on itself. You can still see the marks of picks on the rocks, the outline of bricked-up doorways, even the occasional initials scratched into walls. For the volunteers who spent decades uncovering them, the tunnels are more than a curiosity. They're a living connection to a forgotten chapter in Liverpool's past. An underground memorial to the city's working men, its dreamers and its eccentrics. And still, the work continues. Every so often, a new cavity is found beneath a floor or garden wall. A fresh section of passage appears where none was thought to exist. The network grows, quietly, patiently, as if Williamson's spirit still urges them on. Dig a little deeper, there's more beneath. If you stand on Mason Street today, you'll never guess what lies below your feet. Cars pass, children walk to school, a train rattles through Edge Hill, and beneath it all, silent chambers rest in the dark, carved by candlelight 2 centuries ago. The Williamson tunnels are many things at once. A mystery of engineering, a monument to eccentricity, a social experiment, and perhaps a parable of faith. They remind us that history isn't always written in books. Sometimes it's quarried into stone, buried and rediscovered by chance. Joseph Williamson died in 1840, leaving no map, no will, and no explanation. His contemporaries tried to make sense of him, calling him everything from a saint to a madman. Yet his legacy survives, not through business empires or political influence, but through the handful of volunteers who continue to unearth his work. Each barrow of rubble they clear is an act of resurrection, one forgotten story pulled back into the light. And perhaps that's why the tunnels still captivate us. They speak to a truth buried inside every city, that beneath the streets we know lie another layer, stranger, older, more human. The foundations of who we were before we became what we are. Liverpool's underground maze is only one example. Every city has buried histories, hidden catacombs, sealed subways, forgotten factories, echoes of lives erased by progress. They wait patiently just under the surface until curiosity and courage bring them back. Williamson once told a visitor he had no purpose in digging, that he simply followed the fancy of the moment. But look around. 200 years later, people are still following those fancies of his, map in hand, torch in grip, descending into the quiet world he left behind. In the end, perhaps that is his purpose, to remind us that the past isn't dead, it's just sleeping. I'm Mark Kerrigan, and this has been Forgotten Urban Histories. Join me next time as we descend again beneath familiar streets to uncover the extraordinary worlds that lie hidden below.